A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Films I Should Have Talked About Years Ago, Season 2. And now, what we're going to be doing here is, well, I should probably dispel the worry first before moving on, because there's been a number of locations I have transferred to since this season began, and so I'd say right here is probably where I could settle for the rest of the time itself. And so, let's go ahead and talk a bit about Bruce Willis, yet again, because he's definitely had a lot of things going on in his entire career when it comes to being on screen at any given moment. This is, of course, one of his earlier works, but it's also one of the most obscured works that he's been a part of. May 1991 came Hudson Hawk. This is actually one of the many movies of the 90s that a lot of people consider criminally underrated. A lot of people consider it criminally underrated by today's standards. To some extent, I can more or less agree on that part, because a lot of people these days would put it as probably one of the funniest comedies that have ever shown up in the early 90s. Probably on par with the likes of Wayne's World, for instance. Even though that came out later, but Hudson Hawk actually does something a bit different as opposed to just having two guys in a basement running their own TV show. And here, the world's greatest cat burglar, dubbed Hudson Hawk, gets out of a long prison sentence. He's released back into society, and he basically tries to do stuff on his own. He tries to have a good life, and even score himself a cup of cappuccino. Yeah, of all things that you could ever do after a long prison sentence, you go over to the local cafe, meet up with the barista, and ask for a cup of cappuccino. So, if you think that that's weird, maybe take a look at what happens next, because the cappuccino itself that he tries to drink gets shot. It gets shot down by a group of brothers. Brothers who are basically mercenaries. And these are the kinds of people that actually want to try and put him on contract work to ensure that his cat burglar status is not completely dried out. Of course, Hudson rightfully declines from that sort of stuff, because he could go right back to prison, square one, in less than a few days. So with that in mind, what happens then is a government agency whom, by the way, has all of their members named after candy bars. Kit Kat? Baby Ruth? Butterfinger? Like, really? That is just ridiculous, but I would have it no other way here. Having government agents named after famous candy bars? I mean, if I had to go with any of which, I'd probably say Coffee Crisp would be my all-time best choice, but regardless of that, these government agents do in fact try to protect Hudson Hawk every step of the way. While he also discovers somebody at an auction. A person who is in fact interested in going ahead and trying to place a bid on a very rare item. A piece of art done by the one and only Leonardo da Vinci. Of course, in the very beginning of the movie, we tend to get this opening scene where it depicts a piece of history from way back in the day. When Leonardo da Vinci wasn't even done finishing up on the Mona Lisa that happened way back in the 16th century, he was actually hard at work at a bunch of other inventions that he made himself. And what we eventually get out of this is that, according to what happens in the present day, there are documentations and even right-on discoveries of something that DiCaprio himself is not a part of. Da Vinci, DiCaprio, kind of get the two confused, but the thing is that Da Vinci himself actually put together a whole new kind of invention. An invention that is basically powered by a few sets of crystals. And these are crystals unlike anything that had ever been seen before. But in order to find out where these crystals are located, before these same brothers that Hudson himself encountered back at the cafe, he actually has to go and make a few breaking and entering schemes into some museums. So the thing is that his cap burglar status is still technically active. And he could very well face more than just simple grand larceny or the basics of theft. He could probably be doing a lot more time, perhaps in another type of prison, possibly federal, or even more so than that. However, he himself has a never give up attitude, while also trying his hardest to simply make his time fun. Of course, this movie definitely throws a lot of comedy all over you when you least expect it. In scenes you would expect to be very serious, there's times where, for example, Bruce Willis himself is singing about how you could grow up to be a pig, for example. And then, of course, there is that really amazing moment where he actually encounters a dog. A dog who likes to play fetch with the ball, of course. But then, of course, at the end of the very movie itself, the dog comes back again, tries to mess with him. But he does have himself a plan. He's the man with the plan, of course, as he has a machine that fires. Not just any balls, but balls that are powerful enough to knock the dog out of Da Vinci's castle. Wow. A castle that's sitting on top of a mountain with a really high slope, and the dog literally gets shot out of the window and falls to its death. Like, I could not really bear to watch that moment. It's just so disturbing. A dog gets flung out a window and falls to its death. Man, that almost ruins it for me. But I mean, everything else seems to help to make up for this. But I really do feel that they should have done a lot more than just simply create some sort of simple animal abuse scene like this. But above all that good stuff, Hudson himself managed to overcome a lot of different challenges, defeat the hostile gangs and mercenaries that he comes across, save his friends, but most importantly, solve the mystery of Da Vinci's greatest invention, which is just a huge room full of various contraptions that he built. And the crystals serve as the power source. When arranged in the correct pattern, it forms a unique shape that actually does serve as a conduit to provide power to the system itself. But after a simple piece breaks off, it's enough to completely blow the place up. But hey, they do manage to escape after all, inside another one of Da Vinci's contraptions, which is basically a precursor to the many flying objects that would eventually evolve into the famous airplane. So Da Vinci was definitely ahead of the time for sure on that part. But it wasn't necessarily realistic. It's more meant for gliding, not for flying, like what the Wright brothers managed to do in 1904. But the thing is that this movie definitely has itself a happy ending, amongst all things that you thought were possible. Plenty of laughs, plenty of unique bits and pieces, well, apart from the dog dying, but I really did enjoy it for what it was. A nice, worthy addition to rent on YouTube, and with that in mind, my scoring of this is going to end up at a 7.8 out of 10.1, which is only fair enough considering that it's comedy, it's action, and it's impeccable style for 1991 compared to many other movies that were released at the time. Sure does come together to make something out of the ordinary that turns out to be completely different than most. Comedies can be all over the place, and this one just might be one of the most unique that we've seen from that time. And Bruce Willis certainly has made a huge career from then on out. Considering where he's at today, he should probably look back at this with a lot of envy and plenty of fond memories to work with. So I suppose that pretty much cuts it for this presentation, but stick around tomorrow for another piece that I'll have soon in this series.